Trolls, baby! Okay, so I love trolls. They've always been one of my favorite folklore creatures, and the ones from Warhammer especially, I've always thought were just super cool aesthetically. So, as a lot of you probably know, this big boy came out recently, and I actually managed to get my hands on some Kimera paints, which I've been wanting to try out for like a really long time. So, I'm gonna take the big boy, I'm gonna take those paints, I'm gonna mash them all together, see what I can do. And I know, GW, they're not called trolls, they're called Troggoths now. Whatever, deal with it. Here we go. Alright, so assembling Trugg the Troggoth King was both very easy and an extreme pain in the ass butts. The Trugg's Great Trogg Herd box comes with a good chunk of plastic. However, only one sprue in the box is actually for the big boy, Trugg himself. Now, I enjoy the assembly process, but dealing with little tiny bits can be a drag sometimes. So I was quite happy to see that Trugg was in so few pieces, especially if those pieces fit well together, which they do and they don't. Despite my attempts to tightly fit all the pieces together, there were still a good amount of seams and gaps to fill and sand down. I did my best, but I still ended up missing some, which I found once I started painting. Shame on me. I suggest taking a good amount of time to work on the assembly for Trugg. He really needs a good hand and a steady eye to remove all of those visible seams and gaps. I haven't seen connections this tricky from GW in quite a long time, so yeah. I decided to put some cork on Mr. Trugg's base to create some elevated ground. Later, I will cover this in some texture paint and turn the recessed areas that are not covered in cork into some swampy areas for some swamp troll fun. When assembly was done, it was time to prime this hunk up. Looking good, you sexy monster. Now, before I go painting this guy up, I just want to talk a little bit about the Kimera paints that I'm so excited to try. I picked up both the base paint set and the first expansion set, which I've heard is very useful as it contains a lot of skin and natural tones. Sorry for interrupting this video. I've been going on and on about these paints and about Trugg, but have you tried Kimera paints? What do you think about this model? Leave a comment down below, like, dislike, hey, maybe even subscribe if you want to see some more of this. Anyways, I'll leave you alone, back to the video. The reason I've been so excited to try these out is because Kimera paints are single pigment paints. With other hobby paints, a red may contain 2, 3, 4 pigments. So when you mix these multi-pigment paints together, you're going to get varied results. A red and a blue, you would expect to get purple, but it may look kind of muddy brown or a little gray just because of all those other pigments that are mixed in, kind of playing around with that color a bit. With single pigment paints, it kind of opens up this playground of creativity on your palette where you can play around with the paints a lot more and really get results that you are kind of expecting. The thing about single pigment paints is that some of those pigments may actually be a lot more transparent than others. So there's going to be a lot of variation in how the different colors play just because of their natural properties. But this also means that you have transparency to play with, which can be a good thing at times. You can also mix in like other colors like white or black, which do happen to cover really well in order to up the opacity of these transparent pigments. These paints just really seem to help in pushing you to try new things, to learn about color theory, and just to generally be a bit more creative in your approach. I was super excited to give them a go. One last thing is that the base paint set comes with this handy reference sheet on how to mix the paints to get some different colors. But even better than that is the pamphlet that comes from the expansion set. It contains a ton of references for different color spectrums and how to make some very specific colors within those spectrums. Just a couple of super handy guides to help get you started on your color mixing journey. Okay, sorry for gushing. Back to the cuddly troll beast. The first test with these paints that I wanted to do was run them through an airbrush. I mixed up some black and cobalt blue-green, a really nice teal color, with some AK thinner to lay down some shadows. The paint sprayed extremely smoothly off the bat and covered very well. No clogging, and a single pass did what I needed, creating some really nice dark teal shadows in the recesses. I like this blue-green color so much that I can see myself running out of it pretty quickly, using it in all kinds of different projects. Thankfully, these paints come in larger bottles, 30 milliliters, than brands like, let's say, Citadel, which comes in 12 milliliter bottles. So it's gonna stretch a lot farther, though you may go through it a little more than you think once you start mixing colors around, just kind of playing with it a bunch. Next, I wanted to try some dry brushing. I took the blue-green and mixed it again with black, but in a higher color to black ratio, slowly increasing the amount of blue-green and lessening the coverage with each subsequent layer. As I got to the point of using no black in the mix, I decided to add a little bit of white into the blue-green. This helped significantly with the coverage and helped finish off the final layer. Actually, it worked too well. I ended up being heavier handed than I intended to be, and I lost a lot of that saturation that I wanted to keep. To solve this problem, I decided to carefully airbrush some of the cobalt blue-green back over the model, trying not to blow out the shading I had created. What I found was a bit of a nice revelation. Instead of acting in a way that I would normally expect, high opacity, this Kimera paint has such a high transparency that it acted as an extremely efficient color filter. With a couple of layers, the shadows still pierced through the color strongly, while the lighter areas took on a lot more saturation. I was very happy with the final result. At this point, I was having fun with the airbrush, so I decided to add in some colorful areas to Trugg's skin using magenta. It really made him pop. These colors are just so vibrant. At this point, I needed a nice accent color and wanted to paint his face up a bit. I decided to bring in Kimera's warm yellow into the mix, adding some white to increase the coverage, as yellow is a very transparent paint with low density pigmentation. It really covered well with the white mixed in. Next, I added some white to the magenta, which gave me this really nice bubblegum pink, which I decided to add to his big slobbering tongue. Next, I added in a little bit of black to that previous yellow and white mix, and it gave me this really dirty looking yellow, which I decided to use for his nasty gnashers as well as his finger and toenails. I've been talking so much about these paints, but I want to take a second to talk about Trugg himself. This model is amazing. While I did have some issues with the assembly process, the model itself is just gorgeous. What I've found with a lot of GW's newer models is that they're really, really nice, but they can also be just covered in these little details that, while they look great, they're not exactly painter friendly. It can be really fiddly to work around these small details. And while Trugg himself is covered in a lot of detail, there's a lot of space in between those details that are kind of open for interpretation or to play around with, or just to add your own spin on the model. It's really, really nice, and I've just absolutely enjoyed painting this guy. As I continued to work on Trugg with these paints, I found I was really just playing with the paint, having fun with this sandbox sitting in front of me. It's so much fun to have paint on your palette, and instead of searching around for a new color, you can often take the existing bottles in front of you and concoct new hues, levels of saturation, shades, and highlights. Now, this is coming from someone who has a problem. I buy more paint than I could possibly need. I love collecting different brands of paint. Every company seems to have their own approach. Different consistencies, different color spectrums. Some paints like Scale Color from Scale 75 even use a gel medium instead of a water-based medium. And that's one of the reasons I love using Scale Color, because it's a unique experience. Just like using oil paints or enamels instead of acrylics. It's just a new way to enjoy the hobby that we love. And that's the same with these Kimera paints. They have opened up a new way for me to experience the hobby. Okay, so at this point, it just sounds like I'm shilling Kimera, but they're not perfect. It's not something you're going to want to use for every project. While mixing up paints on your palette can be great for a single piece, it's not going to be as good for something like an army. Many people want a unified look to their army. This means using colors that are extremely consistent and repeatable. Ultramarine blue and Morphang brown are always going to be that color. There's no guesswork. You just grab a bottle, start painting your model, and you know it's gonna look like everything else in your army because it's the exact same color. Easy peasy, my friend. But I do think that Kimera paints are a fantastic option if you're someone looking for new paints and you really just want to experience something new. After using them, I do believe they will stay in my standard rotation, although there are some situations where it's much better for me to just rely on other hobby paints. But there's still a lot for me to learn inside of these bottles, and I'm really excited to just dive back in during my next project and see what I can come up with. Though I do really like Pro Acryl, and I am missing some sets. Maybe I should just pick them up. So what do you think about Trugg here? Did I do him justice? I really like how vibrant the colors came out, and I just really had a lot of fun painting him up and playing around with the paint and just seeing what I could come up with. Let me know what you think down in the comments. Like, dislike, subscribe if you want to see some more of this. And of course, until next time, paint today for a better tomorrow. Peace out.